Gentlemen, welcome to the Be the Man podcast. I'm your host, Greg Denning, the creator and coach in the Be the Man Masterclass and Tribe. And today, my friends, we have a very special and very beautiful guest. My wife, Rachel Denning, is with us because what we're going to talk about today is an extremely powerful and complex idea. It's philosophical.
And I'm good at philosophizing.
And at least we think we are good at philosophizing. We esteem ourselves to be amateur philosophers.
Right.
But we love this idea, and whenever there's a big complex idea, you guys know this already, if you can have somebody there to think through it with you, you can get different angles. So an ideal situation is if we were all in a room together and we're discussing this idea, and then we could get ideas from each other, and we could grow and develop and take those ideas and see them from different angles and debate about them and really get a solid grasp on this whole concept. But we'll start today. I hope you will do some thinking while you're listening, ideally even do some writing about this topic with yourself, and then discuss it with your spouse and your kids and your friends and colleagues. And if you're inside, those of you who are inside the Be the Man tribe, we can talk through this. We can talk through it in the Be the Man app and in our live trainings. And those of you who aren't in it, join us, brother. Get in this group of great men who are committed to becoming the best husbands and fathers and providers and businessmen and leaders we can be. But take this idea and mull it around in your head. Let it marinate and just chew on it for a long time till you can see what necessary action is on your horizon so you can be free. Now, before we hit the recording, Rachel and I were talking, she was like, gosh, can you even be free? And there's this idea of that, right? Like conceptually, you're like, okay, absolutely, we are dependent. And I would say the best way to be is interdependent. So we shouldn't be too independent or too dependent. We want to find a healthy balance of interdependence. But there are some things where, at least my perception, having been in well over 50 countries now, traveled extensively for decades, worked with thousands of men across 5 continents, most of us are too dependent on things, and we've given up our freedom. So there's a cost there. There's what I call an exchange rate, and many of us are wearing handcuffs. Some of those are what's been referred to as golden handcuffs, where you get all kinds of nice benefits and perks and all these good things, but they are handcuffs nonetheless. And many, many, many good men have told me that. They're like, yeah, I feel like I've traded over my freedom. I've traded over my life, my lifestyle. I've traded over the things I really want, my own dreams, at the expense of something or someone they wanted. So lots and lots of men. So some have golden handcuffs on, some have silver handcuffs on, some just have piece crap garbage handcuffs on. You've handed over your freedom for nothing. The exchange on that was just junk. And so we're going to talk about breaking free. I know, like, as far as I can remember, I just feel like I was born free, because for the longest time I've had this rebellious
spirit.
Yeah, I've had this rebel spirit in me, like, you will not tell me what to do, sir. Even as a little kid. And I just wanted
I definitely
to be
had that.
free. Yeah, you did too. It's like, no, we will. And I think it's part of the human spirit. Like, no, man. We're not born to be here just to be told what to do, and yet so many of us just acquiesce. We, in some, theoretical or metaphorical sense, like, we remove our spines and hand it over. We castrate ourselves and, like, sure, here, take my balls and put them in a jar on the shelf over there, and I'll just be your little eunuch. And I'm being blunt here and bold because it's pathetic how many good men are walking around like castrated, caged lions. And the tragedy is we put ourselves in those cages. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So all this came about because Rachel saw something trending.
Trending audio
Instagram.
on Instagram.
And so she grabbed it and was like, oh, it's trending. This is cool. And she threw it on there.
Well, I mean, I obviously connected with it in some way because I only share things on our page that I feel have some relevance. And so I took the audio and I made it into a reel, and it went viral essentially. And the audio was basically the only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. And behind the audio, I put pictures of us living our extraordinary family life. It happened to be traveling through Turkey because that's where we were at the time. And, it just showed pictures of us living a free life. Because ultimately, to me, that's what it represents. Our family specifically is able to live anywhere in the world we want to live. Well, even then, and this is where I get philosophical, because, technically not anywhere in the world, because we have talked about we'd love to go spend a month in Mongolia, but that's not an option for us because
and we'll talk through that.
Because our income is internet dependent. So we can live anywhere in the world that has a good internet connection. But that gives us more freedom than a lot of people have, where they have to go to a job and earn an income from a location-dependent job or career. So we are now location-independent, which means we do have that freedom. We've been able to spend the past 6 months. Well, this isn't new. We've spent the past 15 years traveling, but the past 6 months specifically, we've been in, I think, 16 or 17 countries. We're in Egypt right now. And I think it's the 17th country in the last 6 months. And that freedom is brought about by our location-independent income, which we worked very hard to create so that we could have that freedom.
We deliberately chose to
have that
seek
lifestyle,
out, find, and create an income that was location-independent because we wanted the freedom to be able to work from, live from, study in, and we'll come back to all these things, wherever we wanted that. Of course, we are dependent on a good internet connection. So we're not totally free.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is, kind of my remark I made beforehand was like, can you ever really be free? There's levels. There's always levels.
Right.
And so even now for us, the next level is the amount of freedom where we could take off work for a month and go to Mongolia where there's not an internet connection, and we'd be fine. The money would keep coming in because of our investments and our business. Like, that's the next level of freedom for us, is to be able to do that so that you have even more freedom. You can now go do that. And you can go to Mongolia and live on the steppe in a gur, and your business is going to keep operating.
Yep.
That's the next level of freedom.
And I like that there's steps in that too. It might be the case where I can take a month off of work. So when I come back, I'll need to keep working. Mm-hmm. But the next step is, and again, I'm throwing this out to all of you listening. There's these levels. Like, do you want to be location independent? You don't have to be. Some of you love your work and you want to be there doing your work in your spot, and you love where you live. Fantastic. That's great, because you're choosing that. You're free. You have options, you have choices, and you're choosing into the life you want.
Well, and even just to expand on that a little more, because even the location, there's always trade-offs with everything. We talk about this all the time. There's always an exchange rate. And even with the location independence, there's still a trade-off, because one thing we don't have a lot of is networking. When you're out traveling the world, you're meeting a ton of people, but it's not necessarily a networking type of meeting where you're meeting people who might facilitate or help with your long-term business or career goals, right? That's
or
not
even
just
friendship
something,
goals.
Or that too. That's not just something that happens naturally as a result of you being, if with a location-dependent job or business, you're meeting the people in your community that are going to be contributing to some of those goals. And so there is that trade-off where you give up some of that for the other side of, another type of freedom, I guess.
Exactly. And I think that would be important to point out early on too. There are a massive, if not infinite, variety of freedoms. And so it's going to look differently for each of us. But the point here is that we are pursuing freedom and not just going to acquiesce. We're not going to settle. We're not going to play small and live in a little cage. We're going to be free.
And along what you're saying there, I think it's important to emphasize that there's different levels of freedom in different areas of life. And so you have to actually pick and choose what's more important to you so that you can pursue freedom in that thing, potentially at the expense of freedom in something else.
So there has to be a hierarchy of
values.
Your values and your priorities. You're right, because there's levels of freedom in each aspect or each role of life, and you may not be able to have them all simultaneously. So the ideal then would be to align yourself and your actions in the pursuit of freedom according to what you value most,
right,
and what your family values most.
Because I think some people only feel like they're not free simply because they're not prioritizing freedom in the things that really matter to them over freedom in something else.
And well, ironically, it's a lot of self-sabotage. We'll circle back to that. A lot of your own slavery is your cause, and so you're sitting there saying, I wish I had more freedom, this sucks. And when you dig deep into it, you're the cause of your own servitude and your own slavery.
Or, you're the cause, or some other value that you have is contributing to that lack of freedom because you feel that it's very important when it might actually not be as important as you thought.
Right.
I think it is. I mean, for one very relevant example in my mind is family expectations and church or society expectations, because I know early on in our own journey those played a massive role, and so we didn't allow ourselves to pursue certain things or to travel to certain areas. Specifically with our religious background, we had this belief growing up that we had to stay within the boundaries of the church we belonged to, and so it prohibited us from traveling to some place where that church didn't exist, physically, because we thought, we can't go outside of those boundaries. But when we were able to rethink that and reevaluate that and realize, no, we can still be participators in our beliefs without having to stay within physical boundaries, that gave us more freedom to go have more experiences that were transformative for us, that were like really impactful in our beliefs and views and just understanding of humanity. And so when we realized that, that's important to me, but the way I was trying to live it was limiting my freedom, and if I reevaluate that, I actually have more freedom to practice what I believe in a way that I didn't view as being possible before.
Yes. So many of us are living under the constraints of what I call societal shoulds, and that can be extended family too. And I hear this all the time. Well, my extended family this, or my aunts and uncles or cousins, or my moms, my siblings, cousins, or just like, what about all these? I feel like all these things that I'm supposed to do or I should be doing. I heard that yesterday in a couple coaching sessions. I'm doing this. I feel like I should. I'm like, why? Where does that even come from? And it's the societal shoulds. It's like things that are kind of said, it's either spoken or kind of unspoken along the way. And then extended family. But when you stop and really dive deep into it, and I do this a lot with coaching clients, and then in the master class, we walk through this, and realize, no, I've been doing that, and it is kind of important to me, but am I willing to sacrifice my own ideals, my own dreams, my own goals, my own family lifestyle because of what my parents had expected, or because of what extended family thinks I should do? And almost always they're like, no way, man. No way am I just going to keep carrying that along. And I see that a lot with men and women who they just feel this pressure from their parents or grandparents, like, well, this is the way things are done. I'm like, well, do you agree with that? I'm like, no, emphatically no. Mm-hmm. Like, well, you don't need to keep going along with it. You don't need to keep participating in things that aren't aligned with your values.
Right. And that could be very difficult, obviously, because in some ways, essentially you are kind of breaking ties, and that can be really hard on, you know, all the members involved.
But you can, and here's one thing I say, you can, and in fact, I did this 2 weeks ago. We had this.
Well, I wasn't done.
Oh, go ahead. Please keep going. I'm sorry.
Well, and this will probably maybe align with what you're saying, but essentially I'm saying that has to happen, and for us it did happen, but ultimately I feel like those ties were able to be healed or renewed or recovered after we made a statement about, no, this is how we're going to do things.
Yep.
This is how we're going to live our life. And initially people obviously kick back against
Right.
that, and they're like, no, what are you doing? This is terrible. You're going to ruin your life. You're going to ruin your kids. We've had all of that. But then over time, as you prove that, no, you're not actually crazy, you just had a different vision that we had, people come around to that. Now, if you don't do that, if you do destroy your life,
Yeah.
that's a problem. And then they're like, we were right. But if you can actually produce results, then they say, oh, actually you're not crazy.
Yeah.
And it can take time. Maybe it might take a decade, who knows? But if you can produce the results that say, actually what I was pursuing was a good thing, it was the right thing for us, here's the results, and then they say, oh, okay.
Yes.
I actually respect you for that.
And I think that's a fundamental basis here. Like if the decisions you make, and we'll even talk about bending or breaking some societal rules in order to get those things. But if you pursue freedom and you tell people, no, I'm pursuing freedom, there's a kickback, people feel threatened, they feel scared.
You're upsetting
attacking
the status quo.
Yeah, exactly. You're attacking their reality of things. If you just say, well, I'm doing freedom, and then you go out and you just tank your life, or you go out and do nothing, that's lame. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't help anyone or any cause.
Breaking free from the status quo is only a good thing if you actually produce extraordinary results.
Yeah.
The
Way
status
better results.
quo is there to actually keep people safe.
Yep.
And I try to tell people this, like, if you can't do better than the status quo, go with the status quo, because
Exactly.
it's better than worse than that, right?
Yep.
So it's in place for a reason, because it's kind of like the bare minimum. If you do this, you'll survive life.
Exactly.
But
Now,
if you
some of
want
you-
something better than
Yes.
that, you have to break free from the status quo, but you have to get the results, because otherwise you will. And we've had this conversation with our kids. We're like, kids, we've actually disadvantaged you in life, because you either have to produce really great results, or you're going to end up worse than status quo. You're going to be worse off because of the unconventional path we've put you on. You have to work hard to get those better results, because you don't have the status quo to fall back on.
Yep. That is the framework. If you're going to step away from the status quo, it's because you are absolutely committed to getting better results.
Right.
That's so important, so powerful. The people who ridiculed us early on now come to us for advice. And I'm not saying that to boast, but saying that that can be the journey of getting the results. And I want to say emphatically that you can still hold your ground, and you can maintain and defend your sovereignty and your freedom without totally destroying ties. Now, some people won't accept that. It's too threatening to them, or their reality, or their mindset, whatever it is. But I wholeheartedly believe that you can live your life. You can live your dream. You can establish your own freedom and maintain it and fight for it and live for it, and still keep touch.
Not be a jerk about it.
Yeah, and you don't have to be a jerk about it, and you don't have to burn down the ship. You don't have to burn down the family farm to go live somewhere else. And people, they don't like it. Most people don't like change, but it is possible to still have those relationships, still be engaged, still be a great person, but dance to your own music and make that happen. So if you're going to live life on your terms, what are your terms? That's the fundamental first step, is you've got to decide what your terms are and start building that out and start getting clarity on that. Otherwise, you're just chasing rainbows, man.
Well, you're
and
climbing
throwing
up,
darts in the dark.
You're climbing the wrong ladder. You know, that the whole little story about if you get to the top of the ladder and you realize it's on the wrong wall, well, you're in trouble. So it's back to that hierarchy of what actually matters to you, because a lot of times you feel a lack of freedom because you're not prioritizing the thing you actually want to be free in. For us, it was represented by the ability to travel and see the world. Like early on, that was the ideal we held up in our mind, was to be able to travel full-time with our family. And we didn't know anyone who was doing that. We didn't know if it was possible, but we thought that's an ideal worth pursuing. And so we pursued that, and we made choices along the way that ultimately led to us reaching that outcome. In fact, back to when you were mentioning the golden handcuffs, one of the things I thought of was along our own journey, there was at least 2 times, if not more, where we specifically gave up the golden handcuffs or turned it down in order to pursue something that was a lot more risky and unknown.
No guarantees. No predictability.
But that we thought ultimately would lead us towards this ideal of being able to travel full-time as a family. The 2 I can think of specifically was...
one was back east, one was out west, and they were both lucrative
they were
offers.
Both job offers that you received that were going to be, over $100,000 a year, plus benefits, plus the allowances, the clothing,
plus commissions,
the commissions, good jobs, and $100,000 a year. That was great, especially back then when we were broke. But we turned them down, and I say we because we were, on board. We were both on board with this. We turned it down to pursue something that was riskier and, like you said, no guarantee, but to us looked like the path leading to eventual full-time family travel option.
And at least it was more aligned with the freedom we wanted for our family lifestyle.
Right.
As you were describing that, I realized there were multiple steps before that. There were like levels of freedom we began seeking before we even thought about or dreamed about or realized we could travel as a family. Like we had already, we bought into the whole like steady paycheck every other Friday until 65. If we retire early at 63, that'll be awesome. We bought into that.
That's how we started our marriage.
But there were levels of the pursuit of freedom that we took before that got us to the place where we could even explore the pursuit of, location independence.
Right.
And try and travel. That's
before
super
we
awesome.
even knew that was a thing or a term.
And one of them was, and we can get into some of these, but one of them was the pursuit of physical health. There's absolute freedom from the healthcare system. Well, we'll circle back to that, but it was freedom in that. It was actually freedom to earn more income, because I was in a great career that I absolutely loved, but no matter how well I did, if I was one of the greatest in the company, my income was fixed. So my pursuit of excellence and becoming really, really good at what I do didn't scale. Like there was no income scale with my improvement scale.
Right. And
so we pursued freedom to earn more. And that was steps in the right direction.
So you had to actually leave that position you love so that we could have more freedom to earn more money.
Yep.
And then step by step we just kept. I remember specifically these moments where we just kept asking ourselves. We had to decide about something important, like that, the $100,000 job or whatever, and we would say, "Is this going to help us reach that goal of full-time family travel? Is it going to help us get closer to our dream?" And we would say like that little thing to ourselves and ask those questions. And if the answer was no, it's not, then we said no. We turned it down.
Yep. Because
we were so committed to that we were only going to take those actions that would help us, at least from where we were, what we could see. We didn't know all the answers. We didn't have the path clearly marked out for us. But from where we were standing, if we saw it could move us closer, then that was the direction we were going to go, even if it was a significant pay cut.
Yep.
Or, because specifically for one of these jobs you turned down, it was $100,000 plus the bonuses and the commissions and everything. Or we got offered a $25,000 a year job at a nonprofit in India, and that's the one we accepted, with 4 kids. Then I ended up being pregnant with our 5th. That was the one we took on. We were like, yes, we'll take that one because it helps us reach that dream of having this international experience that we want.
Yep. That was awesome. Man.
It wasn't always awesome.
No. Oh my goodness. It was some
hard.
of these were so hard and scary. That's why so many people don't walk away into freedom, because it's like the Wild West or the jungle
terrifying.
Or whatever. You're walking away from
what the known.
This established society, and you're just walking into the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot more people going out there, so there's books about it and videos and courses, and I mean all of our coursework, Rachel's 28-day challenge and the group coaching she does for women, and then the whole masterclass that I do. Like, there's a lot of people showing how it can be done. There's way more than when we started.
Right.
But when we walk away, it's terrifying, and you experience it all. The heartache and the pain and the fear and the gut punch and the hard work, like, it's all there. But I want to say emphatically, it's worth it.
Well, right. I mean, there was a lot of failures. There was a lot, because, you're saying, oh, I'm going to pursue the path that looks like it's going to get me closer, but it's not a clear path. And there's a lot of obstacles and mistakes and challenges on that path. It does take you in that direction, but it's not easy. And so it's very challenging. But from where we are now, with the freedom that we have now, with the direction we're going now, it's absolutely worth it in every way.
Yeah. It made me think of a graphic I saw recently. I actually shared it on my Instagram, where what the path you hope to freedom looks like is like this little trail
Smooth
going up the mountain.
trail.
It's awesome, but it's like, no, you got to swim with sharks and crocodiles and
go through the fiery pit.
I mean, you just get through the full gauntlet in the pursuit of freedom. So there is a high price tag on it. Mm-hmm. And I think God and the universe have established that way on purpose. It's not.
It's only for those who are willing to pay the price.
Yeah, exactly. It's not for the faint-hearted. And if you are faint-hearted right now, there's a way you can strengthen that and fortify that. And that's why we're talking through this. And the whole, everything we're going to do and what we did. Man, I keep thinking of examples. Like, we started, like, right from the get-go, we wanted to be free from the educational system. That was one step in freedom. Mm-hmm. Where we were like, you know what? No, we're not sending our kids to school, because the educational system is... Well,
partly because you were working in the educational system when we started.
Well, I had been.
And
I'd seen the dark side of it all with teachers and students,
before
we
had kids.
Yeah, and I'm like, there's no way ever I'm sending my kids to this. Plus, it's run by the government.
And this is in a very conservative state.
Is just junk. So, okay, let's do this. Let's start with education.
Well, I mean, maybe you're going to talk about this, but even that, back to this idea of the constraints that we give ourselves, or perhaps sabotage ourselves with, the very fact that we didn't put our kids in school at the time when we didn't see it was connected, that also gave us freedom to live in a different way that we wouldn't have had otherwise if we had opted into the system.
Exactly.
Because by not opting into the school system, we suddenly, our schedule's free. If we want to go somewhere, we can go. I mean, right now it's May. It's a school time, but we're in Egypt with our kids. We went to the Egyptian Museum yesterday. We're learning in a different way, and we have the freedom to do this because we never did get sucked into the system, And so there's trade-offs with everything. Yep. And for some people, it might not be worth it for them to manage the education of the children on their own. So that's a freedom they have to give up. Freedom in another thing that they have to give up in order to receive that benefit. So again, it's back to the priorities and the hierarchy. What really matters to you?
That's a great point. If you choose to do home education or home sourcing education for your children, you might be giving up some freedoms.
No, you are. Right. That's what I'm trying to say. You are giving up freedoms because now you can't do things when you want. Even if you created a location independent income, you're bound by the rules and expectations and responsibilities of the school system that your children are involved with. So again, we're not here trying to say everyone needs to live life like we live it, but we're using it as an example of how to be free in an unfree world. Well, you have to start evaluating the areas in which you're giving up freedom. Now, sometimes we're giving up freedom for benefits. That's how it works, you know? But sometimes those benefits might not be worth it. The freedom that we're sacrificing is not ultimately the price we're willing to pay.
I would say though, I wasn't in this space before with education. I am wholeheartedly now like, get your kids out of school, like figure out a different way. There's so many resources now. There's so many different options.
And
get your kids out of government school. I
agree with you, although I do believe that not everyone is prepared or. You're smiling because you're.
Well, that was a perfect feed into my next question.
Is it?
You teed that up perfectly.
Okay,
you didn't even know what I was going to ask.
Not everyone is necessarily prepared, and I don't want to use the word qualified because I don't think, like, you know, I'm not a teacher. I don't even have a college degree, and yet I feel qualified to teach my children because of my skills in other areas of project management and outsourcing. But one of the things you talked about,
you have
earned my own education, right?
Autodidactic education.
But I also have gained the skills to be able to manage and direct the education of my children. And that's I think the benefit that many people don't realize today. We live in a world where you can easily educate your children online because there's so many resources online that you're not doing it all yourself. You're simply identifying the resources and managing the schedule.
So you're a director, you're educational director.
You're the director of the education.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the question I was going to get to is, what knowledge and skills must you acquire to even be able to begin to make your own terms? Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask that again. Let that sink in. What knowledge and skills must you acquire to even be able to begin to make your own terms? And I think education is the first place. We have to, all of us. There's never a graduation from education. We have to pursue and acquire a world-class education.
Yeah, you're talking about not your children's education. You're talking about your individual education.
So I can't begin to establish my own terms and really be free if my education is limited. Mm-hmm. I can't even think clearly. I can't even understand what's happening. I can't understand myself. I can't understand societies or economies and history. Like, what's happening in the world? Where are we at in the history of the world and the cycles and patterns in the world? If I'm just going along with the tide and the waves and drifting, in the currents, and I don't even know, I'm clueless about what's happening. Mm-hmm. I can't establish my own terms. And I definitely can't help my kids do it, and I can't help my kids earn a world-class education either if I don't have my own. So I need to be working on that all the time. And this isn't chronological where I spend some time and then all of a sudden I hear this all the time, I got my education, like I'm somehow educated. The pursuit of education is indefinite. You just keep learning. So we didn't want to be confined by government schools and their rules and the garbage they're actually dictated or required to teach, and just all the junk's there. We wanted nothing to do with that. We wanted to live on our own terms. One of those ways was to keep our kids out of the school system and pursue education in a different way. So now, just on this trip, the educational experiences we've had as a family, and our children, of course, have experienced just in the last 6 months, off the charts, man. Mm-hmm. Off the charts, from thousands and thousands of years of history, and seeing it, touching it, feeling it, hearing it, smelling it, being right there where it happened. Mm-hmm. From the pyramids here in Egypt to
Auschwitz, Poland,
in Ephesus, in Turkey, where Paul preached and lived for 3 years to Istanbul, which was Constantinople, to Viking period, and the indigenous people, the Sami people in the very north of Scandinavia. I mean, and museums and, oh man, so many cool things, and languages and cultures and religions. It's just been phenomenal. And that's only available because of layers of freedom we've been working towards.
Right.
So that's just one of them. And again, I want to keep emphasizing this point. So many things that people kind of chalk up as bad luck or constraints, or I can't do that, or I wish I could, oh, you guys are so lucky. So much of that is actually self-inflicted.
Yeah, for the life we're living now, like everything you've just described, none of that was luck.
Right.
It was all very specific and deliberate strategy and planning. Yeah. That's the only way it happened.
And bold action in many
bold
cases.
action. Like there is luck involved. I'm not going to say that there's no luck. But there's more strategy and planning than there is luck, I would say.
And luck, to me, is when preparation meets opportunity.
Right. Fortune favors the bold.
Yeah. The more prepared you are and the more bold you are, the luckier you are.
Exactly.
Or seem. So, circling back, you guys, the triple trifecta for the whole strategy for be the man, right? Is fitness is the first one. That's mind, body, and spirit. It's family, marriage, parenting, and family legacy. And it's finances. So your income, your expenses, and your investments for your financial independence. So we can go through all of those and just touch on them in this holistic approach and see how you can pursue freedom or how you're living under constraints. So let's talk about the physical body, right? And health, mind, body, spirit, and wellness, and how you can pursue freedom. Remember, the quote is that you want to live in such a way you become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. Many, many good men are absolutely trapped or stuck or confined by the poor condition of their body, which of course affects their mind and spirit. So it's combined. The obvious example on the surface is addiction. That is bondage. You cannot be free when you're an addict. And so the very first place to start there is to break free from any and all addictions. I just
Which requires bold action. Very bold action.
And massive discipline and systems and strategies to make it sustainable, to make it work, to break away. But I won't. I refuse to be beholden to any substance in order to be who I want to be. Like some people drink alcohol because they want to loosen up a little bit and have more fun. And if some kind of drug or alcohol, you feel like you're dependent on that for your fun, you're a slave. The more common one is people are so dependent on caffeine to even get going or to have energy. If you're dependent, if you're addicted to some kind of substance that to have energy to get going, you're not free, brother. And you got to get free from any of those substances and any of that garbage.
Well, even going back to using the past 6 months of our life as an example, in order to do what we have done, to travel to 17 countries in 6 months, that requires huge amounts of energy. I don't even know if people can comprehend it unless they've done something similar. It requires huge amounts of energy. Brain energy, mind planning energy, physical energy of, do you know how many times we have packed and unpacked our stuff? And
taken boats and trains and buses
and trains and ferries
planes.
and planes. Like, so much moving happens because 17 countries, but at least double that or triple that in cities that we have been to, it's huge amounts of energy. So you cannot, I don't think we could physically do it, literally, if either of us were overweight.
Yep.
Or like just lacking in overall health. If either of us were unhealthy in any way, we couldn't do it, because it's so intensive that you have to be in a peak state practically to do it, because you're going and we're constantly making critically important decisions. Like, you have to be so good at decision making in order to not just have it be an epic fail everywhere you go, you know. And we've been able to reduce those mistakes and mishaps, you know, to pretty minimally. I would say maybe there's been 5 major mishaps on this trip, maybe. But otherwise, we're able to dial it in so that we can avoid the disasters and the meltdowns that happen from a lack of energy and a lack of, I keep referencing the decision making, because, you know, that's the cognitive functioning there. And if you don't have that dialed in, you're going to be making mistakes that are going to have serious consequences. And then you're going to say, oh my gosh, this was the worst idea ever.
And you do not have to go out traveling in order to experience the disasters of bad decisions and low energy and poor health. I mean, it is a train wreck of mind, body, and spirit. And I mean, we're talking about pursuing your dreams and goals, whatever yours look like. You have to have more than average. If it's just mediocre, you're going to settle into a mediocre existence. And even then, you're going to suffer so much if your brain and body are not in peak condition. You have to be healthy.
Right. And so while we're using this past 6 months experience as a metaphor, in reality, I think that's what's happening with a lot of people, is that they are experiencing a lack of freedom, or meltdowns, or major disasters, or failures, because of the lack of conditioning they have in their brain and body. So it's this, we're talking about freedom. You're not experiencing as much freedom as you could in your daily life because you're lacking decision-making skills, cognitive thinking ability, energy that can contribute. A lot of people just don't get things done or do the things they know they're supposed to do because they don't have the energy to do it. And the reason you don't have the energy to do it is because you're not taking care of your body and brain. So, of course, then you lack freedom in your life because of that factor.
Yep. And even when they do it, the way they show up to it in a low energy state, both physically and mentally and emotionally, you do poorer work and you do slower work.
Right.
So again, it's bondage. All around it's bondage. So if you are out of shape and overweight, it is a form of slavery. You are a slave to the restraints of poor health. Ooh, let that hit home. So look at any vices you have in your life, because something like pornography, right? That's total bondage and so much suffering. But then the emotional help, like how you handle things, how you process things, the mental, emotional, the psychological, the physiological, the spiritual, all of it's combined there for tempers, choices like we talked about, for whether you have inner peace or inner torment, right? And I want to say boldly here, it is possible to live most of your life without suffering. Some people are like, well, it's just suffering. Oh, life is just suffering. You know, I grew up under a philosophy from my parents that life sucks, then you die. And I embrace that. I live by it, and then I realized, no, that's not true. Most of the suck and misery in life is self-inflicted. It's because of servitude. It's because of this slavery, this bondage. It's because we lack the freedom. Now, yes, there's going to be suffering, obviously. It's going to happen. But most of our lives, we can enjoy the peace and tranquility and joy and bliss of freedom.
And yes, there are going to be things that are outside of our control. Especially, you know, as children, things can happen to us that we don't have control over. And then the whole refugee crises, well, currently in Ukraine, but, you know, before that in Syria and all over the place. Yes, there are things that are tragic, that are outside of our control. And I just recently had someone share a story with me from a Ukrainian refugee, and basically everyone she knows has died. And horrible, horrible things are happening. And the one thing that I thought of was, that's unbelievably tragic and sad. And I obviously can't know what it's like to go through that. But I do know that there are people who have experienced things like that, or worse, that have lived and written to tell that ultimately we have power over not what happens to us, but how we respond to what happens to us. And, specifically Viktor Frankl, who was in Auschwitz concentration camp, and then Edith Eger, who was she in Auschwitz also, or she was in? Oh.
Yeah.
And both of them have written amazing books about, hers are called The Choice and The Gift. Like, ultimately, you have a choice on how you respond to these things in your life. And you have, the gift you have is to be able to make something positive out of it. So, yes.
And that only comes from freedom. And
yeah.
In fact, they both talk about that.
Exactly.
And so does
That's
Corey
the
ten Boom in
ultimate
The Hiding
freedom.
Place. Like, no, you can keep being a prisoner, or you can be free. Mm-hmm. And they all point that out. Like, even the terrible things that happen directly to you, you can choose at that point. That's what Edith talks about so much in The Choice. It's like, you can choose to be a prisoner, you can choose to be a slave, or you can choose to be free.
Right.
And those who choose freedom in all of these areas of life then have power to recover, or rebuild, or restart, or do more, or even be inspirational and help other people. I mean, it's unbelievable, but you have to have freedom. So much of the good things in life, the happiness, the pleasure, the elation in health and marriage and raising a family and doing great work and in making a contribution to the world, those things are deliberate. The lack of suffering is deliberate. It's not luck, it's not chance. It's breaking away from this bondage that is so much self-inflicted from our own stupidity.
Well, and so, yeah, I kind of want to tie this in even more and point out how the suffering is self-inflicted, because like Corey ten Boom and Frankl and Edith Eger are talking about, that yes, these horrible things can happen to you, and less horrible things, just normal life things can happen to you, but it's ultimately how you decide to interpret it and the meaning that you give to it that determines whether or not you're suffering from it or using it to bless your life.
Yep. Or even in some cases, just dismissing it because you're like,
that
well, that's just crap.
Right.
I actually had a coaching session yesterday talking about this very thing. It's just mental management. The way we're managing our minds, like you said, the meaning we're giving to things, the way we're handling our thoughts, our own self-talk, the dialogue that's going on in our head, what we allow in, what we allow to stay, what we bring in to our heads is the determining factor of whether we're in a great space or in a terrible space. And so the anxiety and the depression and the desperation, the self-loathing, the hopelessness, the learned helplessness, the vast majority of it is just self-inflicted because of a lack of mental management. So many of those things, so many mental illnesses are really just a form of bondage, another form of bondage. And so we have to look at the mind, our thoughts, education. We have to learn how to think, what to think. We have to make sure we have the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, and make sure that we are mentally free.
Right, because mental illness ultimately comes down to a lack of positive mental habits. Just like physical illness is a lack of positive physical habits or health habits, it's the same thing
with the mind. Exactly.
With the mind.
Yep.
And so people think that they're a victim to mental illness and that it's outside of their control and they're in bondage to that. But the truth is, you actually have way more power than you realize, and it's based on the mental habits that you have developed or not developed. I mean, you have developed them. You just have the wrong ones that are producing mental illness.
Exactly. So
Just like poor physical habits produce physical illness.
Yep. Which, okay, and there's layers there. Then that makes us dependent on medications that we don't need to be taking if we're healthy. And then it makes us dependent on a healthcare system that really sucks bad.
Right. We've opted out of that.
We're just totally out of that. And now, hold on, so I'm not misunderstood here. If we have an emergency, oh my goodness, I am so grateful and gladly will pay medical bills if there's an emergency. If I break my leg and I need to go in an ambulance and get it set, wow, yes, absolutely.
That's what it's there for.
But if the vast majority of ambulance calls, the vast majority of people in the hospital are there for
preventable diseases.
Yeah, exactly. For illnesses, for suffering that is totally preventable. So you can break away from that. And even like we're kind of purists, where you break away from most supplements. I'm extremely skeptical of the vast majority of supplements, especially because if you kind of look behind the curtain, like everybody and their dog wants to have a supplement company, and they're just putting together whatever to try to sell it. I mean, it's just money making, and it's a joke. So even down to like the protein powders, or take this thing for this, whatever. Like, no, just eat good, pure, healthy food.
Nutrient dense food.
Get good food. So break away from your dependence on all the junk. Be free. Mind, we talked about that. Let's talk about spirit for just a second. There's a lot of spiritual emptiness, a lot of spiritual corruption on a big scale and on an individual scale. And there's a lot of spiritual conformity, where you're just kind of going through the motions. And again, any one of those is some form of bondage or slavery. You're not free. And so be willing to be free, to give your spirit the wings to fly, right? And do what you have to do to be spiritually free. I hope this is hitting home for all of you. Just seeing each aspect of your life, every part of it is this, what is that? This
kaleidoscope?
Yeah. And the relationship between all these aspects or elements of slavery and freedom.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just to expound on that a little bit, because I think some people are trying to experience more freedom in their spirituality, and that results sometimes in them throwing off their religion. And while I understand why people do that, and that perhaps that's necessary sometimes, I also think you can have more freedom in your religion without
rejecting it all
or abandoning it.
Yep.
Because in our own journey, we've studied a lot and have also learned a lot about other religions, and we personally believe that religion is very important. It is one of those things, the status quo of society, that helps keep society in check. Religion has a very important role.
Yep.
So I don't think that it's healthy or good for people to just throw off religion, haphazardly, because unless you have something to replace it, you're really going to be upsetting your life in a lot of ways that's not healthy.
Yep.
And very few people make drastic shifts like that. Like, they're going to, very few people convert from, say, like Christianity to being Muslim or something. So unless you replace your religion with something as, let's say, what's the word? Powerful, strong, dominant.
Structural.
Yeah. Religion is a structural form in your life and in your society. So you can't just throw it off and pretend like there's not going to be a void. There will be a void. And unless you really have something as large and dominant, like it's a pillar there, unless you have another pillar to replace that with, you're going to be destabilizing your life. And that's dangerous. So you can practice more freedom in your religion without throwing away the religion. Especially if the dominant religion is also a part of the culture you belong to. So, for example, in Western culture, Christianity is the dominant religion that's also the foundation of the society itself. Right now we're in Egypt, we were just in Turkey. Islam is the dominant religion of the culture. You can't just throw all of that out without having a giant void that's going to destabilize things. So it's possible to keep the religious beliefs and the religious background and keep those things in place, but still practice more freedom of spirituality, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And well, that's why I just keep getting excited about this, because that's such a great example of wanting more freedom. I just want to be free, and so we throw out everything. So there's no structure. It's like taking your skeleton out and just like, I just want to be free. I don't want to be bound by all these bones here.
Right.
These
bones are restricting
I just want to be skin and muscle and nerve, and then you're a blob on the ground.
You have no form or
I'm
structure.
free, but you can't move because there's no structure.
Right. There are certain things in your life that are like that, and people, I think they try to do that sometimes with marriage. People are throwing it out like, oh, marriage, I want to be free to just sleep with whoever I want or have fluid relationships. Same thing. Like, it actually destabilizes you and destabilizes your life. I think religion is like that too.
So it's another form of slavery.
It actually,
You're trading one form of bondage for another.
Right. So it's kind of ironic because you want to throw off the religion in an effort to be more free, but it ends up destabilizing you, and so you become less free. Because what happens is people will assume that certain beliefs or practices were religion only based. Yeah. And so then they throw that out, and then they want to engage in those. And then they may never realize, but they end up in bondage to these practices that were actually, it was one of those status quo things of like, no, this is what we need for a healthy society, like the 10 Commandments. They weren't just haphazardly come up with because it was thousands of years or tens of thousands of years of experimentation to where people saw, oh, actually these things work. If we can all kind of agree to these things, our society is going to be a lot more stable. Right. How about we all agree to that? But then if you throw off religion and think, oh, I'm going to throw out the 10 Commandments too, well, now you're left with what? You're going to start over from the beginning, and you're going to figure it out.
Everything's all relative.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Then you get in the bondage and slavery.
And so then you end up. I'm sorry, I'm really philosophizing today. I keep interrupting you, and then you end up destroying your life for what? That's not more freedom. Right. Destroying your relationships and destroying your religion and your beliefs and everything that's given it some sort of solidity. That's not freedom.
Not at all.
That's just another form of bondage.
And it's a worse bondage.
Exactly.
Then you end up in the bondage of just loneliness and despair and darkness and doubt and fear and misery. Then you become a slave to misery.
Right. So, and then this is the irony, because while our life has a lot of, unconventional freedom by throwing off the status quo, and in many ways we have kept and insisted on other levels of the status quo, marriage for one thing, and a covenant commitment, and parenting, like this. This very traditional family model, because we've, through our study and travel and research and education, have learned that is actually a fundamental part of true freedom. Yep. Like, real happiness and joy and fulfillment come by holding up that standard and living by it, not by throwing it off. And so this is where it can get so challenging to when you question the status quo, and people run into danger doing this, is they question it and then they want to throw out everything. Yep. When the truth is, it's good to question everything, but there are some things that are there for a reason. Society didn't just come up with them. Like, they've been around because they've been proven to actually work
and hold things together. So if you use those things to your benefit to create greater freedom.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're hitting all kinds of things here. Let's kind of touch on family and finances. You want freedom, like that's how we were just kind of wrapped up the last segment. You want absolute freedom in your marriage, but that doesn't mean there aren't standards and rules and structures. Right. You have to live within great standards, rules, and structures in order to have tons of freedom in your marriage.
Yeah, I think in fact to have the ultimate freedom and happiness in your marriage, you do have to live by those and withhold, hold those up, because it's the stability of that structure and that the trust that you can have with one another that allows for the full freedom of expression and vulnerability and intimacy and openness. That's what gives this relationship its freedom and creates its most beautiful form, is when you can solidly trust each other, which happens when you keep the commitments and promises that you've made to each other.
And I would say in this case, that you even have to have higher standards.
Yes.
So it's not having no standards, where I think where people get this confused. Like, well, I just toss out standards and I'm free.
Right.
Oh, no. It's the opposite. You actually have to have higher personal standards.
True.
So this is a perfect example here where, societal standards like, okay, don't do this, don't do that, do that. And it's like this bare minimum of existence.
It's the status quo.
But if you're, in this case, you're like, no, I want absolute total freedom. That means you take on more responsibility and you live by a much, much higher standard. Okay, this is the case in all of it, right? If you have a much higher standard physically, you have better health. If you have a much higher standard mentally and emotionally, you have way better mental health. The same spiritually. If you take, most religions are holding up like a minimum standard. The Ten Commandments are a minimum standard. Most of the standards in your church, they're a minimum standard. Right? If you're going to be able to go to sacred places, they have, hey, you got to meet these minimum standards or you can't come in, and that's the case across most of the world for sacred places.
We just went into the Blue Mosque in Istanbul. You had shorts on, you weren't allowed to go in. You had to cover up. They gave you some. It was looked like a skirt to me. They gave you this skirt thing to cover on that went down to your ankles. As women, we had to cover our heads. They had these requirements for us to be able to go in to see their mosque.
And so even those are the bare minimums, right? But some people look at the bare minimum like, oh shoot, check that box, I'm good. And you're like, no, that's the bare minimum. So raise your standard. If you live by a really high standard spiritually, you'll have more spiritual freedom. Now we move to marriage, parenting, and family legacy in the triple trifecta. If you have much higher standards, then you get more freedom in your marriage. It's beautiful and powerful and wonderful, and you and I, we get to do so much more than other couples because we live by a higher standard. One example is you and I can talk about anything, anytime. We can just open up full, complete dialogue. Every week, Rachel and I both receive messages from people like, ooh, how do I get my spouse to do that or talk about that? How can I even talk about it? And I'm like, well, just talk about it. Just bring it up. Like, oh, I can't do that. Right? They're not even free to communicate openly with each other.
Yeah.
So they don't have freedom in their marriage. And I'm saying, what we are saying is raise your standards. Live by higher standards. Now the same is true with your children. Right? Raise your standards, your own personal standards as a parent, and you have more freedom. Freedom to influence. Freedom to experience life on a completely different level, like we get to do. Like our family legacy, our family lifestyle, our family dynamics are so rare and so beautiful and so free because we've deliberately broken away from outside bondage and transcended or risen above inside bondage, inner bondage, to help pursue that freedom. And then specifically, well, okay, let me talk about that real quick before we go to legacy. You and especially your children are and will be the product of your environment, right? And we refuse to be constrained by environment. Hence the global exploration that we're consistently experiencing. But look at your environment. Look at everything you do as a family. You're going to find, if you just go over this with the fine-tooth comb, as they say, you'll find lots and lots of things in the different layers of your environment that are actually constraints. Some of them you'll find that are structures you want to keep, like we've been talking about. Some of them you'll find like that's an absolute constraint. It's keeping you in bondage. It's preventing your freedom in raising your family. And even in experiencing just a full range of beautiful emotions and happiness and really being free from contention and all the fighting and the bickering and the hatred and the competitions and the disconnection, the distance, the separation inside families.
Well, and even the way in which you actually experience life and gain meaning and fulfillment from living life with your family. One of the things I think of is after we leave Egypt, we're going to Portugal, and it's a place where we're going to set up a home base for our family there. And the reason we're doing that is because pre-COVID, we moved to Georgia in the United States, Georgia the state, and we ended up being there 3 years because of COVID and, the world, things going on. But we were not having the type of life experiences that we wanted to have as a family in that location. Now, not that it had to do with being in one house per se, but that the actual location we were living was not filling or meeting the needs of the people in our family. Like, there just weren't a lot of things for us to do. And so your experience of life as a family is reduced, and so you feel less meaning, you feel less significance, you feel less fulfillment, partly because of where you happen to be living. Now, we can say this because we've lived in so many different places, that where you live actually matters. Big time. And people love to use the little things about, bloom where you're planted, blah, blah, blah.
I think it's a bunch of crap.
And I feel that there's some truth to it. But I also know from experience that where you live matters. And some people bloom in certain places where other people don't. Right. So you might just happen to live in a place that's not a good fit for your family, and you're having this suboptimal experience just because of the environment you're in.
Yes, it's a form of bondage.
It is.
Even if it's just a lack of access to resources or classes or people or community.
Or activities or sports or whatever it is. Like, whatever it is your family loves to do, you have to find a place where they can do those things. And I know, again, some people, they're limited by budget or money. Well, then that's another lack of freedom. You have to find a way to make more money so that you can go live in the place that you want to live. So we are moving to Portugal. We picked it because it was a place that had more of the things we wanted to do as a family. It had more of an outdoor active lifestyle. There's more, days of sunshine. There's surfing, there's paddleboarding, there's hiking, there's lots of things, lots and lots of things
and massive amounts of diversity, and then immediate access to Africa and Europe.
Yes.
And, oh my goodness.
So it has more of these things that we want, and so we, quote unquote, uprooted our family, which for us it's not that new because we've done it lots of times, but people are afraid to do that. And we're going to move there to have a better lifestyle. Now, we're experienced enough to know that that doesn't mean everything about it will be perfect. There's always an exchange rate. There's going to be things we hate about it. That's just normal. No place is going to be perfect. But if you can intentionally create a life that's more exciting to live, that's just another element of being more free. You don't have to just put up with wherever you happen to be planted right now. Like, that's not what you have to do in order to just, whatever the excuse, be a good person, or just, be content with the lot you've been allotted.
Right.
It's not true. It's not real. You need to be more intentional. If you want more freedom, you have to be more intentional about everything, including where you actually live.
I think one of the big problems, I'm glad you bring this up, is that tolerance has been touted as this
a giant virtue. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you don't like where you live, you don't like your life. Well, remember patience and tolerance.
Yeah.
And so we keep putting up with crap.
Right.
And we're not saying don't be grateful and don't, if there is a real constraint for a time, still have a great attitude, still do everything you can within those bounds. But
which is what we did when we were in Georgia. Like,
yeah, we made the most of it.
We're going to have to make the most of it.
But most of your constraints are self-inflicted. And stop using excuse and just dismissing it. Like, what? Oh, the job's here. Are you kidding me? With 8 billion people and anywhere in the world, you can't find more work?
Right.
Well, it's this, money's tight. This is how much I earn. What? With all the economies in the world and all the opportunities, you can't earn more money? You kidding me? Like, let's go. Stop. Well, this is where my family was, and this is where we
and my
grew
kids are in
up.
school, and they don't want to leave.
I'm
like there's always going to be something, but ultimately, and this is where it comes back to that bold action. You have to be willing to take bold action, and often, sometimes, disruptive action.
Yep. Disruptive
to others in your family, and they're not necessarily going to like it. But if you can prove to them that it's going to be worth it, it will be worth it.
Yeah.
It's all what you make it.
So ask yourself constantly, look at every single excuse you use and say, am I willing to hand over my freedom for this excuse? Ooh. Whether, it's family lifestyle or opportunities, specifically think about opportunities, the freedom of opportunities. And many of you are limited, your opportunities are limited just because of some little constraint like that, some excuse you're using, some rationalization or justification, and that can stop, and you can pursue more freedom. Of course, we've been talking about money, and I mean, we can wrap up here with money. It's the third of the triple trifectas. But any constraint there in your income is almost always a lack of knowledge and skills, and often mindset, right? You might have a fixed mindset about money. You might have a scarcity mindset or a poor relationship with money. But again, that's self-inflicted, and it's a form of slavery. It's keeping you from earning more income, or it's a lack of skills. And everything comes down to skill set, knowledge and skill set. So if more skills, specific, valuable, marketable skills are the only thing standing in between you and more income, then get the skills, man. Commit to that and make it happen. You're staying in bondage. You're slavery to your own limitations because you're not acquiring the skills you need. So get the skills. Same with the expenses. Many of you, and sometimes us, we become slaves to our spending habits. And those become restrictive, or they cause problems. And they get us into some kind of bondage. I mean, debt, obviously, well, not all debt, but some debt is a form of bondage. And so we put ourselves into that, right? So the way your money comes in and what you do to do that, the way your money goes out and what you do that, and then investing, of course. The bad investments are a form of bondage, and no investments are a form of bondage. So make it a super high priority to be investing in good things regularly. So if we're constantly trying to improve our income, this is one of the things I've really been emphasizing and training about inside the Be the Man Masterclass and Tribe, that we have a standard to increase significantly, at least deliberately increase your income every quarter. That's the ideal. At a minimum, every 2 quarters or every year, you should be earning more money. And then managing and directing your expenses so they're going to the things that actually matter to you and bring you to freedom, not more bondage. Some of us, we're spending our money on more bondage. It's unbelievable. And then increasing your investments. So your investments are constantly growing, ideally every quarter, and that brings you to more freedom. Mm-hmm. And obviously don't invest in things that lead to more bondage, which some people do that. Some of your investments lead to less freedom instead of more. So you see this? You take every aspect of your life. So fitness, mind, body, and spirit, family, marriage, parenting, and family legacy, and finances, your income, your expenses, your investment. So that's all 9 elements of the triple trifecta. And just go through each element and say, how can I be more free? And be willing to be unconventional. Be willing to be a nonconformist. Be willing to break some of the rules or bend some of the rules and step away from things that are lame.
Well, step away, step above, like we're talking about. Like you have to raise those standards even more. And just as you were talking about the money piece here, and thinking back on our own journey, I know for me, I felt like it was always the money piece that held us back from living our dream life. You know, we always use that cliche term, but that was the one that we just always used, was we were pursuing this dream life. And I think we all have this dream life that we'd like to live. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think more often than not, it's the financial constraints that keep us from pursuing it. We're afraid of taking those risks financially and of the potential disasters, which are real, that could result by risking our financial security. But we wouldn't be where we are now, earning the amount of money we're earning, which is obviously the most we've ever earned, and living the kind of life that we're living, which is a very free life, if we hadn't been willing to pursue that dream life and to take the necessary risks of making it happen. Now, that did, of course, result in failures, sometimes financial failures, hard things that happened. So it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be straightforward. It's not going to be without danger. But it will be amazing and incredible. I mean, like, when you use the word amazing, like, you don't even know. We were in the desert 2 nights or 3 nights ago riding dromedaries, and then you got on this Arabian horse that he let you get on, and you're just riding around.
I like horses. He's like, oh, take my horse and go. And I was running through the desert,
through the Sahara Desert with the pyramids right there in the background, the sun setting. I mean, this is our life, and I'm like, what is this? It's amazing. And we wouldn't be experiencing or having any of that if we hadn't been willing to pursue that less traveled road, I guess, that riskier road. And it's not easy. And it's terrifying. And it's so many things.
Challenging, but so beautiful and so rewarding.
So rewarding. And I think that's why, like, the risk, the rewards are compensation for the risk. That when you do take those risks and you persist and pursue in them, the rewards that you receive are exponential.
Yeah.
They're off the chart.
And worth it. To us, it became non-negotiable. Because, again, in our perception, like, what's the alternative? It's bondage. It's acquiescing.
It's an
settling.
Okay life.
Yeah, it's settling for an okay life. And that's just, to us, that's unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to just live an okay life. So we're going to take on the challenges, we're going to take on the risks to be free. Free to live life on our terms. So, gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thanks for being here. Be bold. Be courageous. Be clear about the terms for your life and the things you want, and get just fierce and tenacious about breaking free, especially from the stupid things. The low-hanging fruit is right there in front of you. It's very obviously robbing you of your freedom. Just dump all of that crap. Just get it out of your life for good. And then chase that freedom and fight for it, and then defend it. And be free so you can maximize your potential. Most of you are living far below your potential. It's just sitting there on the table because you're not picking it up. I mean, some of you can't pick it up because you're shackled and you're handcuffed and you're in bondage. So break free and get to a place where your very existence is an act of rebellion against an unfree world. Be the man.